Good afternoon and welcome to Africa Trade Brief. Now, the International Labour Organization says that the reason for the African continent's steady economic growth can be found in its 1.3 billion inhabitants, which are a largely young and energetic population. The African region has a labour force of around 500 million people, and that figure is expected to increase by 2030, growing to around 676 million. That increase is said to be driven by the rapidly growing number of youth labour market entrants. Let's get some insight into what that labour force looked like a few years ago. This is the formal industry, services, household enterprises and informal. So you can see on the African continent around 2016, that's how the labour was broken up. The Mo Ibrahim Foundation says that the Africa Continental Free Trade Area has the potential to redress some of the challenges that the African continent faces and to maximize Africa's biggest resource, which is its human capital. It says Africa's capacity to adapt to the requirements of the future labour market relative to the region's exposure to future trends leaves very little room for complacency, and Africans must be equipped with future-ready skills to engage in professions such as ICT or tourism, or make the most of underexploited sectors such as agriculture and agri-processing. Let's take a look at where the continent is in terms of economic activity from around 2011 to 2021. We can see that agriculture, industry and services are broken down according to these graphs, and it's not really moving a lot. We see that in 2011, 53.5% was in agriculture, 2021 around 50.3%, so that decreasing. We started in 2012 with around 12.5% in industry, and that's also increasing in the year 2021 to around 13.4%. So how else does employment tie in with trade? The AU Agenda 2063 speaks about the benefits that come from the free movement of people and goods, which includes the promotion of intra-Africa trade, labour mobility and transfer of knowledge and skills. So let's go back a bit in time and zoom in on statistics from Algeria, Botswana, Cabo Verde, Chad, Eswatini, Ghana, Lesotho, Liberia, Namibia, Niger and Nigeria. We're seeing here what that breakdown is around the same industries that we spoke about previously: agriculture, forestry, and fishing in around 2016, making up around 27.9%. Retail trade, transport, wholesale, employing around 17.7% of people on the continent. Construction around 10%, and real estate activities less than 1%. Let's also briefly zoom in on the breakdown of labour in Africa by gender. Take a look at that male and female labour force participation rate around 2018. You can see what's happening in sub-Saharan Africa at that very last graph. So how do labour, economic growth and trade intersect? Professor Mthunzi Mdwaba joins me now. Thanks so much for your time, Professor Mdwaba. Let's start with giving us context on what the African labour market looks like in 2021.
Good afternoon, Zinga, and thank you for having me. I think that the graphs that you were showing, of course, are from 2018-2019. You can rest assured that the breakdown that you've given post the COVID, well, the COVID is not really gone, it's just gone through many variations, has gotten a lot worse in terms of that breakdown, because as you can imagine, services have gotten a lot worse because even as we gear ourselves for the future of work, as we gear ourselves for the highly technological environments of work, the infrastructure challenges in our continent continue to be a problem. And those infrastructure challenges, of course, would affect the informal sector a lot more. You showed on your slide that there was an informal family sector, then there was informality as well. But if you put together those two, you get something like 70 to 80% of informality. And 70 to 80% of informality is the real challenge in our continent and many other similar developing countries like Latin America, parts of Asia, where when you have an incidence like the COVID, like the pandemic, although it gives us huge opportunities for the future, if we were to be able to leverage and recalibrate the pre-existing flaws that our economies had. But as we speak currently, we cannot run away from the fact that a big majority of our people who are in the informal sector, who have no infrastructure, would therefore render it difficult to be able to have any movement in terms of an environment that would require technology like services and so on. And so, but you find also that even in the other areas that may not be as intense or intensive when it gets to technology, because of the absence from work for like a year and a half, where you've got an economy that's misfiring and an economy that has to be shut down from time to time, things have not improved at all.
All right, Professor Mdwaba, let's talk about how a country or continent's labor force affects the economic growth and, most importantly, trade. Well,
the whole, as the French would say, raison d'être, the whole rationale of having an economy is to make sure that there are people who are there to service it. And of course, a labor force is the most important in this instance. When you come specifically within the African continent and South Africa being no different, given the context of the informal sector that I spoke about, and then adding some of the elements you showed between male and female, and then issues of the youth, you would recognize that the impact is huge, because what happens is that you cannot have any economic sustainability or resilience when in fact the people can't even be at work, for starters. But secondly, it is a huge challenge when you have an inability to be able to continue training or skilling, reskilling, or upskilling people, which we've had an inability to do. So as we move forward, we're going to have to very constructively and in a very productive manner, with the interventions of the likes of Productivity South Africa, which also helps as a secretariat for the Pan-African Productivity Association, to come in and intervene within the economy so that the labor force is able to be far more ready as we move and transition into a future that's already started, but that's getting faster and faster all the time. And because of the incidents like the pandemic and our own pre-existing challenges, we are being left behind and we are having to play huge catch-up.
All right, so how are we going to do that catch-up, to not only catch up, but leap forward into the future of work?
Well, we're going to do that catch-up by less talk and doing. Unfortunately, we're not known for this. I might sadly say within our continent, we have huge policies. We've got very good policies in the continent, contrary to what people may believe. But the majority of those policies are caught in a time warp. They're caught in the past. They are caught in what I would refer to as an ideological misfit for a future that has no time and no tolerance for us wanting to label things, not recognizing the diverse forms of work that exist, not recognizing, for example, that out of digital platforms, as much as we have to be careful to always be people-centric, if we don't embrace those, if we don't enable those and empower the youth and empower women and a lot of people who are on the fringes of the economy, do something to the informal sector. For example, in the informal sector, you'll hear a lot of people talking about transitioning people from informality to formality. I don't think that's enough. We need a very wide array of innovative and creative tools, and not patronize our people as well, engage them, have lots of social dialogue, consult on how to move forward. If we do that, we are going to be able to play catch up. But if we don't do that and we continue to do the things of old with huge ideological fixation of fetishes, then it's difficult to play catch up.
Professor
It also
Mdwaba,
means that we need to bring into our economy.
Before we do go, though, I'm just going to ask you about your candidacy for the position of DG of the International Labour Organization and the importance of an African in that space.
Well, the importance of an African, Nzinga, really relates to the fact that the ILO was born in 1919. It is the oldest, certainly, entity in the multilateral environment within the UN family. We've never had an African, nor have we had an Asian. So historically, it's absolutely key. But I think more fundamentally is to understand that, and I don't want people to misunderstand that, as proud as I am to be an African and as proud as I am to be South African, people need to realize that my candidacy is based on competence, is based on expertise, is based on experience, is based on understanding what needs to be done, and is based on wanting to, by all means, intensify and improve on all the good work that the ILO has done, enhance, and by so doing, reposition the role that the ILO should be playing, which I think is a very, very important role going forward.
Professor Mthunzi Mdwaba, candidate for position of Director General of the International Labour Organization. Thanks so much for your time on Africa Trade Brief and SABC News this afternoon. And that's where we leave it for now. My colleague Diabo Seto is